What's going on, everybody? If you're like me and looking to upgrade the sound system in your 2015 to 2020 F-150, but not trying to lose that space underneath the back seat, this is the video for you. Now, it's no surprise that my 2017 F-150 King Ranch with the Sony stereo system in it doesn't come with all the bass and low notes that I would like to get out of a sound system. On top of that, my factory head unit had memory loss issues. Setting up my Bluetooth, it would disconnect about 30 minutes into the ride and would not reconnect for the rest of the ride. Because of that, I chose to go with an aftermarket head unit rather than trying to replace the factory head unit. Considering the factory head unit will run you about $1,000, you can get an aftermarket head unit that have more capabilities than your factory head unit for roughly the same amount of money. Although having an aftermarket head unit does change the way you install a sound system in your F-150, that's not what we're here to talk about. Today we're here to talk about how to install a subwoofer and an amplifier in your F-150 without losing any of your storage space, like I've done on my truck. After doing a little research online, I came across a bunch of forums that talk about different subwoofers and different amplifier setups that you can install in your F-150, but most of which require you to consume the space that's underneath your back seat. For me, that is not the route I wanted to go. I would like to maintain as much space in my truck as I can, as when we do road trips, we pack it in full inside the truck. But I was able to add a Rockford 200 watt RMS 2 ohm 10-inch sub with a single channel Class D 500 watt amp by Rockford in my truck without losing any of that storage space. You can see behind me that my seat is folded up, and I don't lose any of the capability to be able to fold up my seat or put it back down. I'm going to drop the links to the amplifier and the subwoofer, as well as the wiring kit that I bought all off Amazon. And guys, this setup is not real expensive. This isn't a competition winning setup. This isn't going to blow the doors off your car, but it will add a lot of that low-end range to your sound system if you're looking to capture that range. Now, as I said before, my truck comes already with the Sony sound system already installed. It has an 8-inch sub with an enclosure in the back already, but that just didn't do it for me. I needed a little bit more on the low end, and I like to be able to jam out listening to the music when I'm trying to have a fun ride. And that factory 8-inch sub from Sony wasn't quite cutting it for me. Guys, this system doesn't break the bank, and I'm telling you, I am very pleased with the way that it came out. It definitely adds that low-end tone without spending all that money that you need to get a top-notch stereo system. If that's what you're looking to do, you're going to have to consume that space, get a bigger enclosure, get a higher wattage amp. But if you're just looking to beef up that lower end, this is a good setup for you without losing any of that storage. Let's take a look. Now guys, I did change my head unit out to the Linkswell Gen 4 head unit that has Apple CarPlay, along with a lot of other applications. You can download Netflix, YouTube, and a whole array of apps to go on this unit. But it is not necessary in order to do this audio upgrade to have changed out your head unit. So when we get to the point where we're looking at the amplifier, I'm going to show you guys how to do it if you did not upgrade your factory head unit like I have. This factory head unit runs about $1,400. I got it off Amazon, just like I did with the amp and the sub. I really like the head unit. I'll kind of go into that on another video at another time, and kind of do like a full ignition startup and everything, and kind of go over what I like and don't like about this stereo unit. But let's move on from that for now. So for those of you that have ever installed a sound system on your truck or on a car before, you know that there's a couple wires that you have to run in order to supply that amplifier with power and to supply it with the signal it needs to turn on, as well as the audio signal it needs from either the speakers that are coming out of the vehicle as it is, or if you've changed your head unit out, usually you'll have those RCA cables that'll run out the back of that'll provide that amplifier with the sound signal that it needs. Now in my truck, I ran the power wire straight off the battery here. It's got a little terminal end on here. Let's see if I can give you guys a good shot of that. Just put the power wire coming straight off the battery there. Ran it up and over against the firewall across all the way there. I did zip tie it up to the top there. It's got a little bit of slack, nothing major though. And then it comes over and it heads over right down here. I got a zip tie just to keep it in place. And then there's a grommet that goes right through that firewall there. You got a wire bundle that runs right through that grommet. The idea is to kind of poke a hole on the side of that grommet near the wire bundle, but keep that blade faced away from the wire bundle the entire time. The last thing you want to do is cut one of those wires, end up having to have it towed into the factory so that they can go ahead and provide you with a new wire harness that's going to cost you a couple $1,000s. So I'm going to stick this GoPro down in here and see if I can't get you a better shot of where mine went through, and then we'll enter the cabin and take a look at where it comes through the cabin there. So I know that's not the greatest because, you know, it's light outside, it's in a dark little hole inside the engine compartment. But let's take a look at where that wire comes through the firewall of the truck that we're going to want to run all the way back to where we want to place our amp. So as you guys can see, that wire comes straight behind this emergency brake pedal if you have the pedal on your truck. But it's coming straight through there. You just feed it through there. I poked a hole on both sides. That grommet has like two flanges, one on the interior side, one on the exterior side. Then I tied a hanger to the end of my power wire, fed that hanger through, and then pulled it through. That grommet is likely to come out and not fit that hole while you're trying to do this. You'll have to reset that grommet. I used a little tiny hook to kind of just feed it through one part and work the edge of that all the way back around. But you can see that power wire come through there. So that wire comes down through, comes underneath my mat, and then it goes underneath this kick panel down here. Once it hits that kick panel, there's a channel. Let me see, I'm not giving you a great view here. It comes through this kick panel underneath the hood latch lever and all that, and it's sitting underneath this kick panel. And then there's a channel that's going to come all the way down here where the door seal is and the door jamb. That wire is going to go all the way back. You're going to open up the door jambs on the front, the door jambs on the rear, and just kind of feed it through there. On these pieces that are in between where the seat belts are and stuff, you're not taking up those floor jambs. You're just going to kind of push it underneath there and feed it through. Under here, you'll have plenty of room to put those wires down in there. You can zip tie them to the other wires. You can feed it through the other wires that are zip tied already down there, because they're just kind of retention. They're not necessarily cinched down on the wires in there. So you can run it through there. If you have a if you have a aftermarket radio already installed, this is the time when you're going to want to run your RCA cables out of the aftermarket stereo. You're going to run them down. Once you have that stereo out of there, there's plenty of videos already up where you can see them install this. You're going to run those RCA cables out, that remote wire out, zip tie them up across high up behind this whole area down here. You don't want them hanging down. You don't want to be able to see them. You definitely don't want to get your foot hooked on them while you're driving. Run them all the way across here, and then also tuck them into this kick panel down here. Run them all at the same time down this kick panel down in here, and then start to run them across the door jambs just like you would with that power wire. Once you get that done, come to the back door. You'll have all these wires set up here again. The wires will come in under this kick panel as well. They're running all three of them, the RCA, the remote wire, and the power wire are all running through here. Now, again, these panels that are up here that are running this way, you're not taking these off. You're just kind of pushing those wires up. And here is the sneak peek, right? You get to see the power wire, the remote wire, which is the single blue wire. I know I kind of use blue and blue, so. And then you can also see the RCAs that are back in there too. I guess you can't see with my hands in the way, but there's the RCAs right there with the single blue wire and that red wire for the power. Those are just running straight up and over. And here's my amp, guys. This is the nice part, is that my amp is up and out of the way. It's not in any, it's taking up only, I don't know, maybe a foot by 10 inches or so, by 2 inches high in my storage compartment area. But I got my seats up. It's not touching my seats. I got a little bit of Velcro on the back, Velcroing this down to the carpet just to keep it in place without poking any holes. That power wire comes straight into this amplifier here, and you cinch it down with the Allen key that's provided by Rockford Fosgate for this amp. Then you have your ground wire. For my ground wire, I don't know if you guys can see back in there, but for my ground wire, there's a stud sitting right here. I stuck that ground wire right there. To do it the correct way, you'd use a voltmeter, measure the resistance provided by that stud, and see if it gives you enough ground to make this amp run safely. Now, I'll tell you this: that stud usually comes with another nut on top of it, and I try to put that ground in between those two, the stud itself and that nut. And on your amplifier, there's a power right here, little LED light power. It was a bluish reddish color, and it was kind of flickering. If that's the case, your ground is not providing the required amount of resistance to give you safe operation for this amplifier. You need to find a better way to secure that ground down, and it'll start to function correctly. Also, here we can see these RCAs that were routed all the way from the head unit, and also you can see the remote wire right here, this little thin blue one coming in straight from the head unit. So the only other wires that are coming out of here are the sound out wires going to the amplifier, and that's these red just speaker wire coming out here. Now, once you get all the wires ran all the way over here, you would leave that power wire off in the front before you get going over here. You set everything up, then get your ground hooked up, and then at the very last thing you do is go ahead and set that terminal up in the front and connect it to the battery. So there's going to be a few for the installation of the subwoofer. There's already a few videos on how to drop this back seat all the way down, not just this actual seat portion, but the backrest portion. So I'm not going to go into that. There's a ton of videos. There's a little latch that you can put on the back there to make it real easy. All right, guys. So there's a gentleman that has a YouTube video that shows you how to drop this back seat. I will say that the seat bottom has to be up in order to drop the backrest. He does it with a wrench, and he just hooks there's a little cylinder back there, but he takes the whole mechanism off and shows you how to do it in a lot better detail than I can do right now. So take a look, try to find that video, and get this dropped down. I'll move my pillows here for when we go travel. But both of these will just drop down. Of course, making a liar out of me. So both of these will drop down together, just like that. And there we go. We can see my stereo back there, my subwoofer. So there's going to be a little bit of work yet to do back here. Like I said, I had the Sony system already installed in my truck. So my truck already had a subwoofer, an enclosure that was here already. And it already has a factory amp. I'm going to be honest, guys. I don't know if the rest of my speakers are run off this amp or not. And I wasn't about to chance it. So all I did was take the wires that come out of this amplifier that went into the sub box that came with the truck and unplug that. And that's all I did. Now, That's just to mitigate and give yourself some room to install this box here. Now, as you can see, I had to cut away some of this insulation against the back wall here, some of that soundproofing, and I guess that would be some fire protection, probably more just for soundproofing. It really does make that big of a difference. To not cut that out, you'll never fit it back here. Also, there's a mechanism that's bolted up to the wall right here, and I believe it has to do with the safety restraints, or it could be I have airbags in my seat belts, and it could be for that. I'm not sure exactly what it's for, but all I had to do was remove it off the wall, and it just sits on top of the amp box there. It's not the greatest setup. It's not perfect. The better thing to do would be to fabricate a new bracket to install it at a slightly higher position, but it works. And my amp sits back in there real nice and tight. I didn't have to do anything to the box to get it in there. It just slides right in. You have to push it all the way to the back against that wall, and it'll sit on a couple studs, so it's not sitting directly on the floor. There's a couple studs that are coming out that it just rests right on. I guess if you really wanted to, you could grind those studs off and let it sit a little lower. I don't know if that would keep you from having to move from disconnecting this bracket up here. But this stuff's actually pretty easy to cut. A good utility knife will do it. I just did it with a pocket knife that I had. I got a little Gerber pocket knife that I cut it out with. But once you get that other enclosure out, if you have it in there, you slide this, you cut that insulation out, slide this bad boy back in there. Back here we can see this is the wires that came out. This is the connector that came out of the amplifier into the factory sub, and this is all I had to disconnect. And then after that, it's a few bolts to remove that old sub out. Then I connect my sound out wires from my amplifier into the sub to give it the sub the power it needs. Now, yeah, it's good. The sub got a little dented right here from this bracket, but it's not hitting the sub itself, so I'm not too concerned with that. It still sounds great, and it's definitely worth it. So now I'm going to go ahead and put these seats back up. With that sub back there, it does push on the seats a little bit, so it does make it a little more tough to get it up, but it does get up, and it does give you still the full factory capabilities and functionality that you would get without the sub being there, or with the factory sub there, once you get it back into its latching position. This little guy right here, if you guys need to see it, this is the latch. This stud right here is the one you'll pull up on. I use a wrench to reach back there and pull up on this, and that's what unlocks it from its cradle over here. Like I said, you guys can, there's plenty of other videos for that, and there's actually an addition that you can add on to this that'll make dropping the seat down just a little easier, a lot more similar to how your single seat on the passenger side of the vehicle drops down. But let's go ahead and put this seat up, and then I'll talk about the amp just one more time, and that'll be a wrap. And one other thing I didn't mention, for you guys that are setting this same setup up on your factory head unit, for your remote wire that goes, the remote wire is that wire that provides the signal to the amplifier to turn on. That way it's not on the entire time, even when your truck's not on. You don't want that. So you want that amplifier to turn on whenever the vehicle turns on. Now, aftermarket head units already provide that kind of functionality through a wire, and all you got to do is run that wire back there and plug it right into that amp. Now, if y'all remember, that's that little tiny blue wire that ran along with my power wire and my RCAs on the side. For you folks that are installing this with your factory head unit, what we used to do in the past is find a cigarette lighter or some kind of other auxiliary switch that you know powers on whenever the vehicle's on only. And so what I mean by that, and a good way to test that, is to get a phone charger, plug it into a cigarette lighter in your vehicle, or if you have a USB port in your vehicle, plug that phone in there. With the vehicle on, it should be charging, but when you shut that vehicle off and open the door, it should stop charging. That's how you know it's an ignition switch. That's the kind of wire you want to be running, and you tap into that one of those power wires, run that all the way back to your amplifier, and that's what will send the signal to turn the amplifier on. Now, if you need a test, if you have a good remote and you need just to determine whether or not if you're having issues as troubleshooting, the other thing you can do to bypass the remote wire, and this is not, I cannot stress this enough, this is not a permanent setup, but you can jump from that big red thick wire that we ran all the way from the battery. You can make a small couple-inch jumper of thin wire to just go into that remote socket on that amplifier and just jump it right over to the power socket. If it powers on, then you know that your setup's good. The only problem that you're having right now is figuring out how you're going to get that signal to turn the amp on. At that point, it's a matter of finding the right wire in your vehicle that powers on with the truck that can send the signal to the amp to power the amp on. All right, guys. So last thing about this amp, you'll see on this amp, and when you get it out of the box, there'll be this little pigtail wire. There's a small little insert here, and I'm not sure that. Let's see, I already got it disconnected off that. I don't know if I can give you guys a good angle. There's this little insert, and in the box, when you get this, there will be a little pigtail that has this connector in it, coming out with 4 wires with open ends. And what you do is, that will be your high level input. For the guys that did not have a aftermarket stereo setup and you're just using your factory stereo setup, what you'll end up doing is getting some wire, running from the door speakers, running it through the door speakers. So coming from your door speaker, running some just regular speaker wire into the door speaker, feeding it up through here, dropping it down into this channel, just like we ran our RCAs with the aftermarket. When you'll run your speaker wire through here, all the way up, back in here, and then you'll use that little pigtail there to get your sound in here. And this has a high pass filter, which means that when you plug in sound that is meant and intended for a regular speaker, this amp will filter all those highs out of there and let you run your sub and make it sound like a sub, only allowing the lows to pass through. So there's a lot of good reasons for this amp, that being one of the main reasons for those guys that did not want to buy an aftermarket head unit that already does that for them. That's a good setup. For the guys that did have an aftermarket head unit, you'll usually have your aftermarket, you'll already have your RCAs with the filter already applied to them. So guys, this is my setup. Like I said, it does allow me the full range of motion for my F150. Allows that seat to drop down. I get my full seat movement there. I've already had people in the back seat here, surprising them with that speaker rumbling behind their back. But you guys let me know if that's a clean enough install. I know that there's a couple things that are advised, like putting a inline fuse from the power line. I usually keep that seat up. Putting an inline fuse for the power line is a good thing to do. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments below.